everyone, this is Blair Lewis, and this is a little bit of information about evaluation versus assessment. So upon reading some articles, a few things that stood out to me is just that measuring improvement over time, motivating students to study, evaluating teaching methods, and ranking students' capabilities in relation to the whole group evaluation. That's kind of a process for assessments. So assessments is kind of making sure that you're taking some type of measurement over a period of time. Also, just knowing that assessment is a process that we use, and we use it really to improve performance. Whereas evaluation is more of a process used to determine quality of performance. So we use assessment to improve, evaluation is more kind of to reflect. Improving school leadership and why assessment is important. Well, leadership is a process of influence. So it's kind of how you have an effect on a school system. As the school system improves, a lot of that can be attributed to an improvement in leadership skills and abilities. I also believe that assessment's really important because it's how you can make effective decisions, especially about things like grades, placement, advancement, instructional needs, curriculum, and in some cases, funding. I like assessment because you can kind of see how you can improve and how your new implementation is working. But also assessment can be kind of hard because, especially in that case of funding, I think that if kids or the school system itself doesn't take it as seriously, it can have some negative ramifications on teachers when it really shouldn't. Student assessment in teaching and learning, just kind of talking a little bit about how assessment's really important because of the feedback. And I feel like feedback is one of the most important things for both teachers and students because it's hard for kids to know where they need to improve if you don't tell them. And sometimes just grading a paper and handing it back to a kid isn't enough. They need some like written feedback or verbal feedback that's a little bit more of an explanation than just red checks on a test. And just working towards some culturally responsive assessment practices. I honestly, this is one of my weaknesses, I would say. Finding things that are culturally responsive. Even reading some of the articles, I felt like I didn't get a clear message of what cultural responsive assessments looked like. It seemed like using a lot of student interaction and getting their opinions could help. But still, I didn't want the cliche, like changing names in an assessment to seem more diverse. They were saying how diversity kind of can be synonymous with culturally responsive, and it really shouldn't be. Culturally relevant performance assessments. I thought it was really interesting, the senior defense, where seniors basically picked some type of topic and they had to defend it in front of like either a peer group or a group of adults or teachers or administration that kind of summed up what they've learned throughout their education experience. I thought that was really awesome. I also thought it was cool how personal experiences can kind of drive civic and community engagement as well. So students that are really interested in something, kind of letting them use that interest and then intertwine education into whatever they're interested in. And there are some challenges definitely of measuring the well-being of our students. I feel like more and more we're talking about their social, emotional status and just not really knowing what measures happiness and well-being in kids can be kind of hard, especially when you have your hierarchy of needs. Are they unhappy because their basic needs are not being met, or is it something kind of deeper than that with their mental health? It seems like there's a lot of different avenues and ways that we're trying to measure it with surveys and adding kind of advisories and counselors and mental health advocates at schools, but it's just challenging. Leadership definitely influences student learning. It's a top-down approach. If teachers are not feeling supported by administration, then the buy-in is smaller and their effectiveness as a teacher is going to decrease. Versus when you have good leadership that has a solid vision for the school and it's well articulated to the teachers, I feel like that's a really good sign as to why the education at that building is doing so well. I think that just changing and adding leadership to schools that may be struggling could be something that can improve a school that is struggling. I think a lot of ineffective schools or schools that maybe are, if you can't get accredited or they're having issues with their effectiveness, could really probably benefit from some better leadership. Ineffective assessments. There are tons of ineffective assessments. I would argue even sometimes the ACT can be kind of biased, in my opinion, just for people who are lower SES or maybe don't have the reading skills that other students have. I feel like the ACT can be very reading heavy. If you can read quickly and comprehend, then you'll do well. And that's on all sections. I don't think just the reading section. So I feel like it's really a reading test more so than a test of separate subjects anyways. I feel like college professors are correct when they say that students lacked that critical thinking and problem solving skills. I even find it in high school. I mean, I have seniors that really struggle to advocate for themselves when they're struggling and problem solve. They want answers to their problems more so than to think through what avenues they could take themselves. Why do we continue to use ineffective assessments? I thought this was kind of interesting, just that graduation rates and college acceptance numbers and even like the completion percentage, like who goes to college and actually completes it, who goes to a technical school and completes it and has a job. I think those numbers could be really effective in kind of seeing the accountability of students and teachers and administration even too, and just the school system as a whole. If kids are successful in the real world, then we did our job versus these standardized tests saying whether or not we're doing a good job. I know it's a little too late by using those numbers, but I still think those numbers speak much louder than these ineffective assessments. I think we just don't know what else to use as a guide for an entire country or an entire state or an entire district. They want things that are going to be streamlined and every person is going to have the same, but every area, in my opinion, is not the same. So you can't use the same stick to measure all the kids. Equity in assessment, I think, is also a huge thing. And I really liked this quote from an article I read. Culturally responsive assessment is thus thought of as an assessment that is mindful of the student population the institution serves, using language that is appropriate for all students when developing learning outcomes, acknowledging students' differences in the planning phases of an assessment effort, developing and or using assessment tools that are appropriate for different students, and being intentional in using assessment results to improve learning for all students. I think that's, especially that last part, is really key, is you need to use the results of your assessment to improve learning. You don't use it to gauge how smart a kid is or the capability a child has. You want to use it for the teacher to reflect and see what can I do better now that I know these are where my kids are at, to then improve. I know sometimes it's hard to get buy-in, but if you tell the kids that's what you're planning on doing to do what's best for them in the long run, you'll probably get a lot more buy-in from them on those assessments. I thought I read an article about a school in Zimbabwe and how they were really struggling, had a 0% pass rate in their 7th graders in 2013. I also thought it was really interesting how, compared to more Western world schools, they didn't have a lot of resources. They had some technology, but not a lot. But they didn't know a whole lot about differentiation and scaffolding and how that can impact learning, even just like the way kids sit. can help. Maybe not just all being front-facing desks could help, which is also what I kind of worry about with COVID. Why, while I understand that having all the desks front-facing, all the kids in masks is what is safe, I just do kind of worry about what impact that's going to have on assessment, because I mean, I personally, my classroom has never had all front-facing desks ever. I just don't really like it. I feel like kids are kind of just sitting and getting and staring at me. So I like having more of a collaborative space. I also thought the PISA results from 2015 were interesting. These were some of the topics that it was over, and it was interesting to see how many children were really thought that their parents were invested in their school life, versus themselves being motivated to achieve, was a little bit lower than I would have expected it to be. And then obviously what I thought about anxiety being super high, I completely agreed with. Kids just, everything's super high stakes in school, and I think some teachers get lost on the kids that don't care and don't want to try, when really a majority of students have super high anxiety because it is so tough for them and really high stakes. So impacting and making a difference in student well-being can differ based on where you're at in the world, in the country. I think students feel anxious about their schoolwork and have expectations for their future that are different than the way we see it as adults and as teachers. I think we really need to talk with kids and be kind of vulnerable and willing to hear their side of things in order to truly make a difference in their well-being. I don't think that just having an advisory class where you meet and teach them about how to file a FAFSA or teach them about how to deal with anxiety. I think we really need to do a better job of opening up and allowing kids to tell us what they're anxious about instead of just giving them information and tools. We need to hear them out and hear what they're dealing with. A little bit of a difference, we're going to switch gears to the difference between assessment and evaluation again. I just really agree with this, that assessment's made to identify the level of performance of an individual, whereas evaluation is performed to determine the degree which goals are attained. So it's kind of similar to what we talked about before. Assessment's really good at identifying, where evaluation can kind of see where the goals are and what we need to do in the future. I thought one of the more interesting articles I read was about Indigenous students in the U.S. and just how we really need to advocate for them and understand that they're coming from a completely different place than people who are not Indigenous. And we just need to really push and talk about how we need legislation to put these culturally responsive assessments into practice. And we really need to reevaluate even like the Kansas Math Assessment and Kansas Reading Assessments. Are they really favorable to Indigenous students in the U.S. or not? A little bit about my school district. I think we do a really good job at promoting culturally responsive assessments and just like evaluating and assessing things. And I feel like we have a lot of professional development on kind of what's the different types of assessment and how can we evaluate ourselves and then reflect on that. I would say that we also have in the last, I'd say 2 years, maybe year, have really been pushed to use data. So collecting lots of data and then use that data to then drive our instruction. So if we assess something informally and students are doing poorly on it, we really have been given the green light to slow down, maybe not get to something that we would have gotten to originally, or cut something out that maybe we could tie in somewhere else, and slow down so that way kids really know that concept and then test it again and see if there's improvement, and then we can reflect on that as well. So I really think our district does a good job of advocating for the teachers to do what's best for the kids and really not just push information, and kind of slow down and realize that kids don't all learn at the same rate. And then I had some really awesome sources, 18 different articles, and that is where all of my information came from. So thank you so much for watching.